Hello, everybody. I am Mrs. Poppet, and this is my place. I'm so happy to see you've come again to join me for another story time. Today I have a story I think you may have heard of before, and if you haven't, you're going to hear it right now. It's called Rumpelstiltskin. Once there was a miller who was poor, but who had a beautiful daughter. Now it happened he had to go and speak to the king, and in order to seem important, he foolishly said, "I have a daughter who can spin straw into gold." The king said to the miller, "This is an art that pleases me well. If your daughter is as clever as you say, bring her tomorrow to my palace, and I will put her to the test." When the girl was brought to him the next day, the king took her into a room full of straw, gave her a spinning wheel and a reel, and said, "Now set to work, and if by tomorrow morning you have not spun this straw into gold, you must die." He locked up the room and left her there. The poor miller's daughter did not know what to do. She had no idea how to spin straw into gold. She grew more and more frightened and began to weep. But all at once the door opened, and in came a little man who said, "Good evening, Miss Miller. Why are you crying so?" "Oh, yes," said the girl, "I have to spin straw into gold, and I don't know how to do it."
"What will you give me," the little man said, "if I do it for you?"
"My necklace," said the girl. The little man took the necklace, seated himself in front of the wheel, and whir, 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 3 turns and the reel was full. Then he put another reel on, and whir, 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 3 times round, and the second was full too. And so it went on until morning, when all the straw was spun, and the reels were full of gold. At daybreak the king came into the room, and when he saw the gold he was astonished and delighted, but his heart became greedier. He had the miller's daughter taken to another, much larger room, full of straw, and commanded her to also spin that into gold in one night, or she would be killed. The girl did not know how to save herself, and was crying when the door opened again. Then the little man appeared. He said,
"What will you give me if I spin that straw into gold for you?"
"The ring on my finger," answered the girl. The little man took the ring and began to turn the wheel, and by morning had spun all the straw into glittering gold. The king rejoiced beyond measure at the sight, but still he was not satisfied. He had the miller's daughter taken to a still larger room, full of straw, and said, "You must spin this too in the course of the night, but if you succeed, you shall become my wife." "Even if she's a poor miller's daughter," he thought, "I could not find a richer wife in the whole world." When the girl was alone, the little man came a third time and said,
"What will you give me if I spin this straw into gold?"
"I have nothing left to give," answered the girl.
"Then promise me that if you become queen, you will give me your first child."
"Who knows if that'll ever happen?" thought the miller's daughter, and not knowing how else to escape the king's threat, she promised the little man what he wanted, and he once more spun the straw into gold. When the king came in the morning and found another room full of riches, as he had wished, they were married, and the pretty miller's daughter became queen. A year later the new young queen had a beautiful baby, and she never gave a thought to the little man who had spun the straw into gold. But then one day he suddenly came into her room, and he said, Now
give me what you promised."
the queen was horror-struck, and offered him all the riches of the kingdom if he would just leave her her child. But he said,
"No, something alive is dearer to me than all the treasures in the world."
Then the queen began to lament and cry, and the little man felt some pity for her.
"I will give you 3 days," said he. "If in that time you find out my name, then you shall keep your child."
So the queen thought the whole night of all the names she had ever heard, and she sent a messenger all over the country to inquire far and wide for any other names that there might be. When the little man came the next day, she began with Caspar, Melikor, Balthazar, and said all the names she knew, one after another. But after every one, the little man said,
"That's not my name."
On the second day she sent her servants to inquire the names of all the people in the region, and she repeated to the little man the most uncommon and curious that she heard. "Perhaps your name is Short Ribs, or Shank, or Lace Leg?" But he always answered,
"That is not my name."
On the third day a messenger came back to the palace and said, "I have not been able to find a single new name, but as I came to a high mountain at the end of the forest, I saw a little house, and in front of the house was a fire, and it was burning, and around the fire a ridiculous little man was jumping. He hopped on one leg and shouted,
'The queen's child will be mine no less. They will inquire and hunt in vain, for nobody would ever guess that Rumpelstiltskin is my name.'"
You can imagine how glad the queen was to learn this. Soon after, the little man came in and asked,
"Now, Mistress Queen, what is my name?"
At first she said, "Is your name Conrad?
"No, that is not my name."
Is your name Henry?
"No, that is not my name."
Perhaps your name is Rumpelstiltskin?"
"What evil being told you that name?" cried the little man.
In his anger he stamped his right foot so hard that his whole leg went deep into the ground, and then in a rage he pulled at his left leg so hard with both hands that he tore himself in two. But the queen got to keep her baby, and they lived happily ever after. That was kind of an interesting story, wasn't it? That little man was sure he had the queen tricked, but he didn't realize that he got a little too boastful before he had had the baby won. So he ended up losing everything, even himself. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that story, and I will see you again next time.